inspiring you to build the life of your dreams by teaching you how to create a career you love. This is the Job Lab Podcast with your host, Nick Murphy.
Hello there, my friend, and welcome to the Job Lab Podcast. My name is Nick Murphy, and I'm really grateful that you've chosen to spend some time with me here today on episode number 2 of the podcast. If you're coming back to us again, thank you so much. I'm glad you're here, and I want to welcome any new listeners. I'm happy that you're here, and I'm thrilled and ecstatic that you found us. Now that you are here, please do subscribe to the show to make sure that you never miss an episode. And if you love what you've heard so far, consider leaving a 5-star rating, and feel free to leave a review of the Job Lab Podcast right out there on iTunes. If you did for some reason miss last week, wow, what a show. I spoke with Chris Doris, mental toughness coach, and he talked about mindset and how to challenge our conditioned beliefs. And he asked us all to answer one of the most powerful questions that we could ever answer. And that was, how do we most profoundly want to use the rest of our lives? And Chris's advice segues really nicely into today's guest. John Staup is a talent acquisition leader that has more than a decade of experience hiring and training the very decision makers that often decide our fates when we apply to new gigs out there in the big bad world of work. In my conversation with John, I try to pull back the cloak and give you guys an insight into the mind of those very decision makers. I asked John about the responsibility that falls on organizations to keep their employees engaged at work. We chat about the mindset and perspective that a new grad or a young professional should have in their first 1 to 2 years on the job. And I was really curious to get John's advice about how the average employee can make a name for themselves inside their company and what to do if you find yourself suddenly out of love with your job. Finally, I asked John about the big black hole and how companies are trying to balance technology with human interaction. And of course, we play some rapid fire. And with that, let's get right into my conversation with John Staup. Welcome to episode 2 of the Job Lab. I'm thrilled to be joined today by John Staup. John is a talent acquisition leader, and I'm just going to give you a good intro to him. This is a mouthful, John, so I'm going to do the best I can, but don't judge, all right? Over the last decade, John spent nearly 30,000 hours studying talent acquisition needs and customizing programs to deploy across dozens of industry verticals, from high tech to high volume, and from the boardroom to the plant floor. John's focus has been on 10xing his organization's total talent philosophy and powering results through targeted and intentional people programs.
Nice job.
Yes.
This is off to a good start.
We're going to talk at some point about all of the keywords that are in there that like pop on a LinkedIn recruiter search. But first of all, thanks for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time. And just if you want to fill in any gaps with that bio and tell the world a little bit about what a talent acquisition leader does. It's something that a lot of folks don't understand.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Nick. And it is interesting how I ended up in this space and looking across the industry, whether it be peers or, just other HR professionals, and thinking of myself as a talent acquisition person, but also as an HR person and what that means to a company. It's interesting because I get to blend so many of the engagement and organizational development and unfortunately, employee and labor relations sides of things into, some other business acumens and disciplines that you see across companies like marketing and sales and some of those different types of things. And a day in the life of a talent acquisition professional at the corporate level, at least, is really trying to basically right fit people into a right role or into the appropriate role, at least, to make sure we're getting the right people in the right role to where they get spun up quick and can add value to the company as quickly as possible versus maybe some traditional HR or recruiting staffing philosophies that have existed over the last decade or so, firmly rooted in what I would say labor surplus types of environments. We're operating in a labor scarcity environment now with, national average. I think it's around 2.7% unemployment. So, those types of things, those economic conditions have created roles for guys like me who really get passionate about being targeted and intentional with their talent acquisition programs.
That's a good summary. So talent acquisition, the way I explain it to people is they do that. They acquire the talent. They're in charge of the job advertising. They're in charge of attracting and retaining the talent to actually do the roles. They're filling the boxes on the org chart. Whereas a lot of other disciplines in HR are dealing with regulations and harassment and employee training and things more once they've accepted the offer. And if you want to draw a line in the sand, I've always kind of envisioned it as talent acquisition is everything pre-start date. There's still some things that happen after the start date with TA, but would you add anything to that to just kind of give a visual understanding?
I would basically agree with you. You know, it's a lot of talent acquisition people do kind of get their hands dirty with sort of the new employee onboarding or orientation as well, just to make sure that that person that they just closed the deal in does get off on the right foot through their first day, week, month, whatever it might be. But, you know, so importantly, when we talk about trying to fill those boxes on the org chart is, you know, obviously it's the talent acquisitions department or the talent acquisition department's duty to do that, but they have to bring in so many of the other HR functions, whether it be organizational development or, you know, some of the other things around compensation and benefits, total rewards, those types of things, and make sure that the talent acquisition program that they're delivering, you know, sets those expectations early and often with the candidates that they're seeking out. So there isn't any surprises come day one. And I feel, at least, if you're more upfront and you can speak to those types of things fluently before the candidate ever starts with the company, your chances for making a great hire, we call it quality of hire, increase dramatically.
So you and I have been working together off and on since I was in Indeed in like 2013, something like that. You actually just went through a recent job change yourself. So for somebody who does what you do for a living, how was it to be on the other side of the fence? Did you learn anything? Did anything stick that you're thinking about still as you're still fairly new into your new role?
Yeah, it was a refreshing time for me, to be very honest. It opened my eyes and made me realize how much opportunity there is out there to improve just talent acquisition programs across the board, across industries. You know, the great Mike Tyson once said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And I thought I had a plan. I thought, you know, I've been doing this for over a decade now. I'm just going to hack my way to a fantastic job. And while I ultimately ended up with a fantastic gig, it took a really long time, longer than what I would have liked. And there were so many speed bumps along the way that I was not prepared for, that just really got me off my game. But at the same time made me realize, in this next role that I take, I'm getting back to the grassroots, the fundamentals of what I think a successful talent acquisition program should look like, whether it be technology or, you know, market segmentation or just processes in general. It was really, really surprising to me how inefficient and painful some of those things were at times as I was going through and really assessing the different opportunities and interviewing. And then ultimately, when it came down to making a decision and pulling the trigger for me to accept the position, I had to dig deep emotionally, spiritually, financially, and really make sure that this was a job that represented a career move for me. I think we'll probably talk about or touch upon that a little bit as we go through today's session, but it's so important for any job seeker out there to be as picky as possible when it comes to the jobs that they're selecting. I mean, this is something that, you know, you're spending 40 hours and in most cases well over 40 hours a week doing. So you might as well make sure that whatever role out there that you're considering is truly representative of career move for yourself.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, you know, these types of conversations with folks in positions like yours is something that I want to make a staple of this show. And so I'm kind of going to take the gloves off a little bit and think through where our audience is. And most people are employed in this current economy. Employment's nearly full. But a Gallup study shows, we talked about it in episode 1 with Chris Doris, somewhere between 70 and 80% dissatisfaction or disengagement among employees. So my question for you as somebody who sits on the other side of that, what is the responsibility of companies and HR leaders, if any, to keep their employees engaged? And what are some strategies that you've implemented and seen successful to do that? Because I think you'd admit that's just a dismal number.
Sure. I mean, it is eye-opening every time you see one of those studies and one of those things where we spend a lot of time sitting around conference rooms or pounding the street, talking to employees, whether they be interview or exit interviews or stay interviews or engagement surveys or town halls with the CEO, really trying to solve for. And while I do think that HR plays a huge part, a leading part in building engagement, improving engagement within the workforce, I really truly do believe that it is at the feet of every single person in the organization to build an environment that fosters engagement, right? In some of the past roles, teams, companies, organizations, whatever, that I look at and can sort of point to and say, you know what? I had a blast working there. I mean, every single day I walked in the door and I got to work on something fun with fun people or, whatever other adjective that I can throw in there. I sort of distill it down into an environment that was full of respect, right? And we also trusted each other that they would get, I would get my job done. The person I'm working with, the person I'm working for, the person that's working for me, they're going to get their job done and we're going to keep trucking along. And when we hit a speed bump, whether it be a disagreement or a missed deadline or, whatever it might be, the respect then comes full circle and we're going to have it out. We're going to talk about it. We're going to address the issues. We're going to learn from it, identify what went wrong. And then again, trust that we're going to try our best not to have these things happen again. I think that is the one thing that threads through all of the great jobs that I've been lucky enough to have in my career when I can say, hey, look, this was a truly engaged environment. So, that to me is the most important thing, Nick. On the other side of it, I'll go back to sort of being picky when it comes to being a job seeker. Go after your passion. Okay. Whether it be a particular job that you're really interested in or and haven't had the opportunity yet to really kind of flex your muscles, whether it be accounting or HR, technology, whatever it might be. That's one way of doing it. Another way of looking at it is the industry in general. I come from a high tech industry and now I'm in an electrical utility industry, both of which I find groovy as all get out. To think about just the data and the electricity and community service that companies that I've been able to recently represent here, what they were all about really kind of made me extremely proud to work for them. And I think that also fosters a highly engaged environment as well.
I want to stay on that for a minute, and I'm gonna resist the temptation to jump on you for saying groovy on the air, but you get some kind of award or medal or medallion for being the first guest in the history of the podcast to say groovy. And you're not actually that old, so I'm gonna let that go. But you mentioned being picky with your jobs, and you mentioned in your last story about loving what you're doing and having a blast at work. What are some of the questions that job seekers should be asking folks like yourself and people on your team to be picky and really find out if that alignment is there? Because alignment is more than the job description. Is this job something that I can do with my skills? What are some of the questions that you think best pull that out that might not be out there on every blog post in history about career advice?
Well, first and foremost, everybody does need to realize that homework does not stop when you graduate, high school, college, whatever it might be. It is a constant thing. Whether you are gainfully employed, you're still doing research, you're still completing assignments, you're still doing homework. But if we put the lens on and really scope it to the job, search process as well, I advise everybody to dig in, do their homework, research the company, research the industry, look at your Glassdoors, look at your LinkedIn, look at all of these different websites, the company websites, to study, where their opportunities are at, and try to get a sense of a true SWOT analysis of the company, but also pay attention to the mission, vision, and values of the company. And I'll tell you right now, if it's not obvious what the mission, vision, and values of the companies are, that should be a red flag to everybody. Okay. And then if you're able, once you're able to identify mission, visions, and values, take a self-inventory, Nick, and say, are these things, you got to be honest with yourself. Are these things that I hold dear to myself? Are they core personal values and something that I could easily see myself aligning to, not only in my personal life, but my professional life as well? That to me is a telltale sign of somewhere you're really, really going to enjoy working.
I think that's great advice. There's a lot of folks out there, and millennials get a bad rap. People forget that millennials, by definition, some of them are in their early 30s. They've been in the workforce for a decade or more. But what advice would you give to a new or recent grad who's starting off their career? How should they look at their first 2 to 3 years in the workforce from a macro level? I think a lot of folks get concerned with what my OTE is or how much I'm going to make. How can you marry that with alignment and find your passion and follow it? What's the perspective for someone coming out of school or in their first or second early career job from your position?
First and foremost, I don't mean to sound like the old get off my lawn guy, but there is an element, and I don't care if this is millennial or baby boomer, Nick, somebody entering the workforce or new company, whatever it might be, you're going to have to suck it up. You're going to have to do things you feel are beneath you. I do that every day. Nick, you do that. You have to do it. I mean, you're out hustling and scrambling, trying to do your thing with the Job Lab and Mid-American Careers, the whole deal. Every single day, every single one of us does something, has to complete a task, whether how tedious or administrative, whatever it might be, that feels like I am better than this. That is just the harsh reality, I think, that people need to get used to sooner rather than later, because that thing does not go away ever, at least in my experience. And then, after that, if we really kind of scope it to the person who is just getting their career started, I think the biggest piece of advice I have for people is get yourself a mentor and try to find yourself a mentor as quickly as you possibly can. For years and years and years, I didn't think too much of sort of the mentorship role. But I would say over the last 3 to 5 years, that's completely changed. I've completely changed my mind on that, at least. And that's because maybe I just got better at being a mentor, but I've been blessed with a couple of people who I have mentored over that same time period who have really blossomed their careers. And I'm not saying I was the end all be all of them launching into a wonderful career, but I certainly know I had something to do with it. And I think just the mentorship facet of making sure that these people come into the workplace and truly have somebody to lean on and, complain to or open up about and talk about the great ideas they might have and how you push those narratives forward, or, what do I need to do to appropriately manage this project or communicate with this group or get cross-functional buy-in? What are some lessons that you've learned, John? Those are real conversations that need to be had with this group coming in, any group coming in, whether it be, again, 2 to 3 years in or just fresh into a new company. Try to find somebody that you can trust and will steer you in the right direction.
That's great advice. And you're never too old, too successful, too established for a mentor type of relationship, whether you're the mentor or you're the mentee. We can always be learning something. And for those of you out there that might be intimidated or feel overwhelmed by the word mentor, accountability partner is another thing that really works well. I know I found someone that was like-minded in the office, and we used to go to breakfast on Monday morning after our team meeting, and we would talk about what we wanted to achieve for the week, what we wanted to accomplish, how we were going to do it. And it was, 1, 2, 3 things. And on Friday afternoon at lunch, we'd circle back and evaluate what we got done, what we didn't, what we learned, and start to set the tone for next week. So whether you can feel comfortable getting into a formal mentor-mentee relationship, it doesn't need to be formalized. Don't jump the gun and think that this is some big to do. Just ask some questions. Find some people that are successful in your role. Find some people that have been there and done that, and set up. It could be as simple as a coffee. It could be as simple as some water cooler talk. But yeah, I want to get on the soapbox there for a little bit, because I think that's a really, really critical piece of advice. And nobody at any stage in their career is too good to ask questions and consistently be learning.
Totally agree with you. You put that really well too, on how to get that done. It doesn't need to be a manager or superior, whatever it might be. It could be the person that sits across a cube from you that's doing the same work. Accountability partner is a great way to put it, Nick.
There are a lot of employees out there that want to stay at their company. They're content. They love their benefit package. They like their coworkers, but they've just fallen out of love with their specific job. What advice would you give to someone that finds himself in that situation as to how to bring that conversation to leadership? What's the right time and place, and how should they do that? And what's the ask so that they don't risk their job? Because that's the alternative, right? You don't want to feel ungrateful, or, oh, you don't want to be here, so-and-so is going to leave. But you really want to be honest and transparent and try to stay, engaged, right? Not be one of those 70, 80%. How do you recommend someone feeling like that go about that process?
I'll throw a couple of caveats out there, along with a couple of assumptions I'm going to make as I sort of frame my thoughts on that subject, Nick. First and foremost, it truly is different for every person at every company, in every even department within a company. There's a certain degree of flexibility that you have to have in critical thinking that you need to bring to the table when you think about trying to position yourself for another role in the company. But, I'm going to assume that you are taking your development seriously first and foremost, from an employee perspective. I'm also going to assume that the majority of companies, there is something set up, a formalized performance management or individual development plan discussion, that you have a stage preset to start having some of these conversations about, or at that point in time. As you approach those things, you need to be real honest with your current boss about, what your desires are and what your passions are. I think that you need to also start looking for ways to reach out across different departments and get exposure to other functions within the departments, whether it be one that you desire to get into, or maybe you're just testing the waters. Look for stretch assignments that you can volunteer for. I kind of call it orchestrating your own experiences. Ask for critical feedback. How can I measure my, not only success, but measure my ability to make that next step in my career, and hold yourself accountable to, passing these different thresholds and gateways as you go through your own individual development.
You just made an accidental great segue into the next question, which is, for those people that aren't necessarily out of love with their job yet, how can an ambitious person best make a name for themselves inside your organization? If you're their leader, what's going to get your attention? What's going to put them on your radar, so to speak?
There's a couple of different things, and call it the Holy Trinity for me. But first and foremost, Nick, value people who come to work every day focused on making impacts. They're not worried about, this person said this, or, the different office politics that can go on, that can happen in different organizations. That person that comes in has the ability to block all of that stuff out and just simply focus on moving the needle, moving the ball down the court, whatever you want to call it. I call it just focusing on impact. Additionally, we are a workforce, especially in sort of the thought worker professional space, of very intelligent people, high IQ folks. But what separates, I think, the cream from the crop nowadays, or is at least one of the differentiators, is emotionally intelligent people. It kind of goes hand in hand with the ability to just come in and block everything else out and focus on impacts. But the person who is self-aware, understands they have blind spots, they're well-intentioned, they can manage their emotions in the workplace and really be able to just kind of marshal their own personality and build is a great relationship builder. Last but not least, critical thinking and skills in the workplace, Nick. They're almost a dinosaur of sorts. I can't name or count how many conversations I've had with business leaders or executives or hiring managers, department heads, whatever it might be, when we get down into the nitty gritty of, strategic staffing and being able to staff up or what they need to staff up, their department to get more things done. Everybody sort of has their own spin on it, but it always boils back down to critical thinking skills. Managers want people to come in and not have to have this big script, this big to-do list, this big, checklist that they have to be handed to and just go through step by step. A manager truly wants somebody that can come through and identify a problem for a critical thinker, and then that critical thinker is able to figure their way through the problem and solve it on their own with, or at least minimal help and guidance.
I think you hit that one out of the park. I think so many of the conversations that I have with job seekers, whether that's friends or it's clients, colleagues of mine, referrals, I always find myself saying, focus on what you can control. And I think if you're able to check your ego at the door, use your brain, have a plan, understand your impact, and focus on what you can control, it's amazing the things that can happen.
Totally agree with you.
There's a huge disconnect out there between what the average job seeker or employee feels when they're looking for a new gig and what the company talks about and sees and how they view that. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to play rapid fire with John Staup right after this.
The Job Lab is brought to you by Mid-America Careers, the Midwest Career Network. Quickly search millions of jobs with a single click. Create alerts so you're the first to know when a great new job is posted. Research exciting new career opportunities, and more. No matter where you are in your professional journey, Mid-America Careers can help. Visit midamericacareers.com to claim your free account today.
Welcome back to the Job Lab. I am talking with John Staup, talent acquisition leader. And just before the break, John, I teased this next question, and it's a big deal and something that I'm going to ask every single person that sits in your role that comes onto this show. And it's this. How do you balance systems and technology and the need for enterprises to scale with the human interaction and kindness that seems to have evaporated? There's a huge disconnect. And what can job seekers do to improve their odds of actually making a human connection with recruiters and decision makers? And then the second part of that question is, how can companies better leverage technology without obliterating the need to to put the human back in human resources?
From a job seeker perspective, I like to take sort of a similar approach to finding a job as me as a recruiter would go to find somebody to fill the job. And it's through the targeted and intentional lens that I start to sort of talk through this. I had also mentioned, when I had started my transition out of my previous role into this new one, I thought I had enough hacks and tricks in my bag to make something pop really, really fast. But, that didn't quite happen. However, I do think that there are still some pillars that everybody can use. First and foremost, when you do finally find a job that you think you're qualified for and really want to go after, target your resume to that job posting. I think that's something that you're going to see on so many different blogs, and so many different career sites, Nick. I mean, if you remember 5 years ago when you came in and did the training for my talent acquisition department, we were talking about creating targeted job postings in through the lens of SEO, put the words and the skills and the performance-based things into the actual job posting that we believe would show up on a person's resume, right? Well, you just flip that thing on its ear. And as a job seeker, understand that you should not have just one generic resume for all jobs. You have to take the time to target your resume to the particular job. And then on the flip side of that, to improve your chances even more of not falling in or staying out of that black hole, take networking seriously as well. Don't just think that it's good enough nowadays to submit an application and then magic is going to happen and a recruiter is going to call you the next day. Get on LinkedIn, figure out who those decision makers are, either directly, connect with them or find an introduction to where this person clearly understands who you are, the capabilities that you bring to the table, and hopefully, has a connection to a mutual reference that you can leverage as well.
So all that's tremendous advice. And for a lot of folks, they may be feeling overwhelmed right now. Maybe they're thinking, well, crap, I've got to go home and create 7, 8, 9, 10 different versions of my resume. I've got to look through, my 4,000 LinkedIn contacts and figure out who I should ask for what. So I won't ask you to speak for all companies, but speak directly to that job seeker who takes this seriously, who puts their heart and soul into their job search, finds that job, applies for it, and never hears a word.
Well, sorry. First and foremost, it's going to happen, right? With so much activity going on within the talent acquisition space today, there are simply things that fall through the cracks. However, I think it is probably worthwhile for people to understand that most companies have a talent philosophy to where if you take it seriously enough and really are aligned to the position and pour your heart and soul into it, and you don't hear back from them, chances are you're not aligned to what they're truly looking for. There's another chance that, look, there's an internal that just kind of stepped up to the plate and, filled the job. I can't apologize enough to you for potentially the lack of communication and all those types of things. But, as long as you've identified a process that you feel works for you, continue to be disciplined and execute that process, and something will pop for you sooner or later.
Everything happens for a reason. So if you find yourself in this situation and you're clear on your mission and you've done this work, just keep going. Take the action. Something will pop. And when it does, it will be the right thing at the right time for you. I think if I'm going to add anything to what John said, it's going to go back to his second point and talk about the importance of networking internally. If you find that job that you're absolutely in love with, find someone in your network or someone in your network that you can use to be introduced to someone at that organization, and make sure that your name and resume doesn't fall through the cracks. John's right. Like, maybe you're not the right fit. Maybe you don't align with different things that may or may not be readily obvious in the job description or throughout the process or your initial call with a recruiter. But if you're internally networked and you have someone who's going to pester the decision maker and say, what's up with my friend Randy? He's really interested. You're going to get that feedback if you can find that internal connection. So that's my tack on, I guess, to your answer. And employees inside an organization will typically look out for their friends and referrals, even if they're not getting a spiff on if you're hired. They're going to let you know, just keep looking because it doesn't look good. I don't know, but keep trucking, my friend. John, are you ready to play rapid fire?
I think so. I've heard about this. I've tried to prep as best as I can, Nick, but again, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. So come out swinging and we'll see if I'm standing at the end of this thing.
Not only have you said groovy for the first time, but you have dropped the same Mike Tyson quote now twice. Twice, my friends. This is epic. I don't know that it's going to happen again. And just to throw you a little bit, since you're the first talent acquisition leader, this first question is asking you to pick A or B. So This is a little bit different just to start, and then we'll get into the fun stuff. So when you're deciding on a candidate, which is more important, experience or education?
Experience.
Resume or references?
References.
Attitude or skills?
Attitude.
What do you think about when you're alone in your car?
Other than Nebraska football in the upcoming season, if I were to have to frame it to business, it would be, how am I going to win the day?
Other than daydreaming of Scott Frost, how you're going to win the day. Okay, got it.
Oh, man, he's dreamy.
What's your advice for your previous boss?
My advice for my previous boss would be continue to foster an environment of trust and respect.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
A CEO.
What inspires you?
What inspires me? This might sound shallow, but my family inspires me. Thinking about, I have 2 lovely little girls and a wife I need to keep fed, inspires me, and another one on its way. That's about all the inspiration I need.
That's the opposite of shallow, my friend. What is your biggest fear?
I don't know if I have anything that I could point to other than losing loved ones.
Who do you admire the most?
Oh, Scott Frost. I mean, that's an easy one.
Which celebrity annoys you the most?
I've been hearing a lot about this Bachelor, Nick. I don't know what the guy looks like. I don't even know his name, but my wife has been talking about him a lot, and that's really kind of annoyed me as of late.
Desert Mountain High School, man. I went to high school with Mr.
You're
Ari.
kidding me. That is so fitting.
No. I have entirely too many things in common with the show The Bachelor. That's a whole nother segment on a whole nother show. So we're not going to go there, but Ari Lyondike, Desert Mountain High School, Scottsdale, Arizona. There you go. You get to share a drink or a meal with any person in history, dead or alive. Who is it and why?
I would have to say somewhere along the lines that has made just such a monumental impact in our society, like a Malcolm X or a Martin Luther King Jr., someone like that, just to hear what their inspiration was and how they dealt with their fears. Because what I'm doing and my purpose in society pales in comparison to what they did. And I have got to think that there were some days where they were pretty afraid. So how did they deal with that fear? How did they get through it?
Thanks for being a good sport. You have survived rapid fire. And before we let you go, what is your one parting piece of advice for working professionals, and how can we connect with you?
I'll give my LinkedIn out. I think anybody out there that wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll be ready, willing, and able to answer any questions that you have given time, guys. My biggest piece of advice, again, I think we've touched on it a couple of times, is be picky. There's nothing more than that you deserve in your life than to be picky when it comes to the jobs that you select to go after.
John, I really appreciate you taking the time. I really wanted to initiate the beginning of this conversation. There's so many gaps between what the general public and the tens of millions of employees out there and prospective employees understand about how talent acquisition and corporate HR works. And so I appreciate your candor. I appreciate your transparency. And thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, appreciate it. And thanks for having me. This is fun.
All right, my friend. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with John Staup. You got to hear firsthand from a decision maker in the HR department about all the things that matter to them. And I hope you were able to see that cloak being pulled back and some of the mystery starting to evaporate. Next week on episode 3, I'll chat with an expert in the art of negotiation about how to get more of what we want and how to stop settling for just what is in our jobs. If you're on the fence about how to make a big ask or how to approach a difficult situation in your job, you won't want to miss it. And as a reminder, you can always email or tweet me your questions or your feedback. What's that one question that you want answered that would fundamentally change your situation? If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the show and make sure you never miss an episode. I have a really full calendar of great content all teed up for you, and trust me, these are things you do not want to miss. If you like what you're hearing, please consider giving the Job Lab a 5-star rating and leave a review for us on iTunes. And just to reiterate what John said, you deserve to be picky. Remember to think critically when attacking problems at work, and as a reminder, your homework never, ever stops. We're never too old to have a mentor or an accountability partner. You don't need to feel isolated in your jobs, and just open your eyes, open your mind, and allow yourself to discover the possibilities around you. For those of you feeling disheartened or stuck in your job search, if you've done the work and you've customized your resume effectively and you're well networked, keep at it. You will get what's coming to you, and it will all be worth it in the end. Never settle. Thanks for being here, and I'll be back with you next week.
You've been listening to The Job Lab with your host, Nick Murphy. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe on iTunes or Google Play today.